This is Bucky Brooks and Daniel Jeremiah discussing their NFC North secondaries, where they have them ranked. And we're going to break it down. So let's play the clip. This is from their podcast on the NFL YouTube channel. Let's hear what they had to say about the Lions secondary.
NFC North.
Another tough conversation. And right now I have it Chicago, Green Bay, Detroit, Minnesota. Chicago, because you talk about Jalen Johnson being able to be a stud player. I am a believer in Kevin Byard and a system that allows him to be a see ball, get ball player. Matt Eberflus taking over, kind of doing some of those things. To me, it works out. And I'll say, keep an eye on Tyreek Stevenson. I kind of liked him when he was coming out. I think he's tough. He's physical. He plays to that brand, and on a team that is all about hustle and sweat equity, he is the worker bee that you prefer to have in the back end.
Yeah, I had the same one. I had the same 4. I flipped 2 and 3. I had Detroit 2. I had Green Bay 3. Detroit, I mean, look, this is a young group in the secondary. When you talk about resources, they've put some resources in there. So they've done a nice job. They got a couple of my favorite corners in the draft. When you go to Missouri and Alabama and get 2 of the top corners in this draft class, that helps. So anxious to see how those rookies play. Kirby Joseph been a ball magnet early on. Brian Branch. They've got a lot of good young pieces that kind of all fit together. Carlton Davis now comes over. So they've tried to address this secondary here, both in the draft and in the veteran portion of the offseason.
And they had the line. Well, so Daniel Jeremiah had the Lions secondary second in the NFC North. Bucky Brooks had him third behind the Green Bay Packers. Which side are you guys on with how high you are in this Lions secondary, given what it was last year and kind of going into this upcoming season?
Klotz, I'll let you go first here with this one.
I think they're third. I think when you look at let's take out the Green Bay safeties. When you start at the corners, Jair Alexander, I think, is by far better than any corner that the Detroit Lions have. And it's not a knock at Carlton Davis, but when Jair Alexander is healthy, he's one of the best corners in football. And then you go to Eric Stokes, who's very slept on. He's a second-year player, maybe even third-year player, but another man-to-man guy that they have. And then you go to the safeties, and they just got Javon Bullard out of Georgia, who's a dog, and then they just bring in Xavier McKinney. So I don't really see with their starting 4 that they're going to have out there. There's really not that big of a weakness. To the Lions is not that big of a weakness, but I don't think they have that star power of a Jair Alexander. But when you talk about the Minnesota Vikings and the Chicago Bears, I think those are the clear 1 and 4, Bears obviously being the 1.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bears is a no-brainer one with Jalen Johnson, with Jaquan Brisker, and I know you guys heard the name that, and a lot of people I took flack for it when I drafted him in our NFC North defensive draft. But Tyreek Stevenson, I'm high on Tyreek Stevenson. I think he's a good corner.
I like what he can bring, physical long corner.
Yeah, and he put up a lot of numbers last year, and he's an absolute he's one of those guys. He's an absolute dog too, and you guys know. That's been my word the last 2 months is dog. I just want dogs on football teams. That's what football is about. Klotz, I get what you're saying with the 4, and I would like to know what you kind of feel about my side of things is when you do look at the secondary with the Packers and Lions, I think personally, I don't want it to be like where it's a biased opinion, but take that out of it. I think I would go Lions. If I was an outsider looking in, the only reason I say that is because, like you said, you have the Jair Alexander, you have Javon Bullard, Xavier McKinney, Eric Stokes. You have those guys. Those, like you said, it's a solid 4. But then when you get to the Lions, it feels like to me like Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph, Carlton Davis, Terrion Arnold, Ife Melifonwu, Amik Robertson, Ennis Rakestraw. You have 7 guys there that you can that. Yeah, some of them might not have played in the NFL yet, but if they end up working out, you have 7 dudes there that you can rotate through, and half of those guys can potentially be absolutely elite in the NFL. And then you still have that back half of guys. And that's where I look at the depth of this secondary in the Detroit Lions. I think the depth of that room would put them over the Packers to me. But I do agree, the Packers, Jair Alexander, Javon Bullard, bringing him in from, he's a dog. We know him. Xavier McKinney, we already, you don't have to talk about him. And Eric, that's a good room. I just think with the depth of the Detroit Lions, I think there can be an argument to be made that secondary can get put in front of the Packers because of the depth. Now, if we're talking about just top 4 to top 4, yeah, you probably would go Packers because the Lions, like you would want to put Terrion in that top 4. He hasn't even played a snap in the NFL yet, so you don't know who he's going to be. And Carlton Davis, like I know we talked about it a lot. I feel like this is like Carlton Davis's like opportunity to where he had that Super Bowl run, maybe fell off just a little bit, and now this is like his like second wind of a career. Like you can really be something here in Detroit and have a really good season. So like I feel like that's that for Carlton. And like we know Brian Branch is going to be an all-pro, but like can Kirby kind of take that step forward or Iffy? That's where I'm at with it. So top 4 potentially you could say the Packers, but I just think depth-wise and especially the future and like the potential, I would have to go the Lions at 2.
I don't hate it because I think there's no way that I could argue outside of like Keyshawn Mixon, the Packers really have that much depth in the secondary whatsoever. But my thing is just with the top 4, like if you're asking me who's the top best secondaries in the NFL, I'm not really looking past that top 4. Now, can you put up an argument where you're talking about teams that are close in that upper end talent? Yes. And I agree to your point that in the future, it's without a doubt going to be the Lions. But just right now, it's really hard for me just to look past it because a lot of this Lions secondary is unproven. And I know that you have a rookie back there and with the safety room with Xavier McKinney, but Xavier McKinney, we talk about Brian Branch, those two are just copying clones of each other. So that's why it's really hard to make me move off of it because Brian Branch is usually that guy that makes me just tilt the meter a little bit towards the Lions. And when you have Xavier McKinney, I think as of right now, they play very similar. Brian Branch will be better, but it's just hard for me. But I agree with your point. Lions depth, they absolutely have more depth.
I'm gonna go Lions 2. I agree with Booner. I don't think it's like a big difference. I mean, if you want to go Green Bay, I don't hate it. The only reason why I would say the Lions is because of what Booner said. I think depth. I would give the nod to the Lions. I think Green Bay is the best number 1 corner. But Jair last year did have a bad year. Now it's not like him though. I mean, for his career,
and just the whole Joe Douglas was hell for them.
Yeah, and he didn't have. I think he allowed like 124 passer rating. But would you look at the last prior years? I mean, the numbers are ridiculous. I mean, he allowed like 66 pass rating the year prior to that. So you look at it as like a one-off. So I'm not mad at you for picking the Packers. I just think the depth of the Lions is something I would probably lean. That safety room, especially. I mean, they have multiple safeties that could start on every other rosters, except the best secondaries in the league. It'd probably be a little harder to do that, but I like their depth better. And the Packers, I mean, they have a rookie too, just like the Lions do. In the safety room, it's a little different. I get that, but I guess it's also my confidence in what Terron Arnold can be. Like I think he'll be pretty solid this year.
And his rake straw
is always solid. They don't have a true like Jair-esque number 1 corner, but I think just in totality, just the secondary corner safety, I'm going to give it to the Lions. I know it's hard to think about because last year they were literally one of the worst secondaries. I think only besides Washington they were the worst. So I get that, but I'm going to give the nod to Detroit. But
I do think we all agree
that Chicago's 1 and Vikings are 4. We all agree.
Yes, the Vikings room. I just go look at like they don't have anyone. Byron Murphy, Harrison Smith. Like they have a couple guys, but they don't have names.
Once they get like a legit dude. Josh Metellus, Cameron Bynum, those guys. They have like 2 or 3 guys in that secondary right now. Once they get a guy, they'll have some solid. They're Kirby, they're Iffy. They have those guys there. They just don't have that Brian Branch yet.
I'm not.
I know it's hard to see, but if you watch, especially the back half of last year when they kind of went on that little run, that defense was making plays for that offense, giving Nick Mullins and Josh Dobbs short fields, and they have, especially in that safety room, they have some guys. I'm not saying Pro Bowlers, but they're definitely not laughing stocks.
So they're
not one of the worst secondaries in the NFL.
A guy away on that defense, brother.
Well, they're a guy away from a guy away in the cornerback room. You say? Is that fair? They're about a guy.
I would
away
say that they're probably like I'd give them like a top 20 secondary this year. But it's not like we're acting like the Lions were the 31st.
The 31st, I think. Yeah.
So like let's pump the brakes a little bit. Like the Vikings secondary was much better than Lions secondary this year. Now Lions improved, but the Vikings with Brian Flores over there, Kevin O'Connell, they're going to bring in JJ. What does JJ need? A good defense. I trust that defense is going to improve.
Would love to see it.
Yeah,
sleep on them.
We'll keep an eye. We'll put a bookmark in that one. Let's keep an eye on that one.
Remember Cameron Bynum.
Would say, believe me later.
Believe me later.
Believe me later.
Cameron Bynum.
Don't
Remember,
forget the name.
Cameron Bynum. You have been talking about him for a while, man. Cameron Bynum.
How long has he been in the league?
He was
for?
on a tear at the end of the season last year. Like he was one of the better safeties in football.
I just want to look.
Playing like it. At
Yeah, I'm
least.
looking at his stats right now. 137 total tackles. Yeah, not bad. Not bad.
No,
9
he
pass
actually had a pretty
deflections.
good year.
Yeah, not bad. Not
He
bad.
allowed a better passer rating. It's not. I'm just putting this. It's not the same.
No,
Just say it,
I'm
just
all
say it.
ears. I'm
better
all
Go
ears.
passer
ahead,
rating
just
than
say it.
Jair
Don't have to explain
Alexander
it.
did. So he allowed a better passer rating, but he plays safety. So there's that too.
I am interested, Klotzy. I'll keep a bookmark in that. You know me. I love to hear Klotzy's thoughts on stuff like that. So I can't wait to see how that works out. I just like when you look at it just from the paper wise, you're like, Vikings probably could. They probably could get a little bit better on paper. Probably could.
Yeah.
Now, if they're
Absolutely.
developing young guys, then okay, we can have that conversation. But they're not there yet. I'm more shocked, like just out of nowhere, you just like look at the Bears secondary and you're like, whoa, like they have dudes, which is a little
See,
scary.
like the thing though, like if I'm being honest, and I still like give them like the number one just because they have Brisker back there too. But Jalen Johnson's really the only dude they have. Like, I'm sorry, Kevin Byard is not somebody that I'm like, oh no, they got Kevin Byard. Like if you,
I know, I
understand Philly's
think
secondary
it's
as a
top
whole-
to bottom though. Like they're like, okay,
But that's where it's like I think
I think-
even the Lions have more depth than the Bears secondary. Like if something happens
Yeah.
to Jalen Johnson, if something happens to Jalen Johnson, the Bears instantly go to the fourth, in my opinion. And I think if the Lions were to lose Carlton Davis, if the Lions were to lose Terrion Arnold, I think they're still swimming in the same tier.
I like their safeties though. I like Jaquan Brisker. I do. I like him. And
I do
Kevin,
like Brisker,
Kevin
yeah.
Byard's a little. Yeah, I get. I mean, based
Hey,
on
how do you like Tyreek Stevenson, Jeff?
I like him. I do. I like him.
He'll be like a really good cornerback too for them for a really long time.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a solid pick by
Like an
Booner.
Xavier Rhodes.
Draft. It was a solid
Walmart Xavier Rhodes.
pick. Yeah, like Xavier Rhodes. I remember that.
Rhodes
those
closed.
times.
Him,
Oh,
Harrison Smith,
Rhodes
Yeah.
closed. That
Hold on.
is.
Anderson Sendejo. That was a name. Anderson Sendejo. You forgot about him.
I did. I did.
Captain Munderland.
Jesus.
This was class. He just named like this dude's got an encyclopedia in his head. It's one of the more wild things.